Welcome to the Soul Touched by Dogs podcast, the show for dog lovers who see dogs not as toys or tools, but wise souls worth our respect and care. I'm Anke Herman, and I'm your host. I talk to awesome humans, people who do great work for dogs and their people. So come and join us for today's conversation. Hello and welcome, Zazie. I'm very excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, I always start and ask the same question, so you're not going to be saved either. So let people know where in this lovely world you are and what's your business with dogs.
So I'm in Maple Ridge, BC, Canada, which it's near Vancouver, basically. It's a very beautiful part of the world, lots of lovely forests. As you can tell from my accent, this is not where I'm from. I grew up in Leeds in England, so things are very different here, but I love it here. And I'm an award-winning writer, and I write about both dogs and cats. My books are Bark, Wag, and Purr.
That's so cute.
Thank
So,
you.
it's like I'm just wondering, like, okay, if you continue with other animals, that's going to be sounding really funny too.
This is always what people are asking me, which animal word is it going to be next? But
Oh,
we have
that's
to wait
funny.
and see. I can't spill any beans on anything at the moment. It's
We're not going to
interesting.
push you pressure either.
Yeah, it's interesting to me though to see which ones people come up with, and I'm listening very carefully and thinking, well, should I write that one? Because a lot of people have mentioned it, so we'll see.
Well. So, obviously, so you're not just about dogs then.
No,
What,
cats as well.
cats as well. Like I like cats too, so it's not a problem. But well, on the dog show, so I'm gonna just kind of lead on the with the dog. So I mean, I would imagine you had a dog at some point, and at some point you thought like, I want to turn this into a business, or do you just go, well, oh, actually, let me write a like, how does one come up with the idea of writing that kind of book?
Yeah, so my background is probably not typical at all for people in the industry, except insofar as there was a dog with behavior issues who changed my life. And that part is very, very common. I think there are many, many people in that situation. But I was a human psychologist first. My PhD is in psychology. I did that at the University of Nottingham, and I worked for quite a while as an academic psychologist. And then I moved to Canada with my husband 17 years ago now, I think it is. And I had always wanted to be a writer. So when I got to Canada, I was very lucky. I was accepted onto an MFA creative writing at UBC, and I did that. And that was wonderful. That was so exciting because it was something I'd wanted to do for years and years. And then after that, I started a blog, and the dogs were the reason why I started the blog, really, because we had these two dogs, Ghost and Bodger. We got them very close together. We got Ghost first from one of the local animal shelters, and he was an amazing dog. He was huge. He was a cross between a Siberian Husky and an Alaskan Malamute, and he was very lovely and very sweet, but he really liked other dogs, and we thought he really needs a friend. So we went to get him a friend, and really all we cared about was that he liked the dog. We weren't so bothered for ourselves. I guess we naively thought we could handle anything so long as the dogs got on with each other. You go into these things with the best of intentions. So we adopted Bodger, who was an Australian Shepherd, and he was absolutely lovely. He was an amazingly good friend, and he also had a lot of issues. So he was very reactive on leash. When we first adopted him, he was about 2 years old, and he would spin and spin in circles, sometimes with his tail in his mouth. So he came from a background where he hadn't been properly socialized or properly looked after, and he was afraid of all kinds of things. So we had to do a lot of work with him. And my mum happened to give me a book, which maybe you know about, by John Bradshaw, called in the UK and Europe, it's In Defense of Dogs, and in America, it's Dog Sense, and it's all about canine science. And even though my background was psychology, but psychologists at that time were not at all interested in domesticated animals, rats and mice, yes, Primates, yes. Humans, yes, but dogs and cats, no. And I was like, wow, I did not know that canine science existed. And I just thought it was amazing. And so I started my blog, Companion Animal Psychology, writing about canine science and feline science because I'm a cat person as well. And I just thought it's amazing that there is this science that we can use that can help to make our lives better, our life with our dogs better, because so much of it is very, very practical and it gives us a better understanding of our dogs. So I started Companion Animal Psychology in 2012. And in a way, the rest is history because that got me started on this long journey towards writing books. And I can tell you how the books came about as well, if you'd like to know. But
I'd love to
that's
hear it. Yeah, no, like I've got my first one published, not about dogs, about tech, and the second one in the works. But so I'm always curious, like
congratulations.
how another author kind of goes about things and comes around to the core message and the topic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, congratulations on your books. And
Thank
so
you.
I just was writing my blog and I wasn't really thinking too much about how to get a book, but I did have this idea that I was starting to think about. And I was occasionally writing blog posts on that topic. And then there came a point when I thought, I'm not putting any more of this onto my blog because I don't want someone else to think this is a good idea and go off and write the same kind of book and make it harder for me. And then I was really lucky because this was in the days when Twitter was quite a big thing with lots of people there. And someone who was a literary agent contacted me on Twitter and said, have you ever thought of writing a book? And I was like, yes, actually.
Indeed, I have.
Yes. So we had a meeting. She turned out to be local to me. And we had a meeting and talked about ideas. And ultimately, that is the book that became WAG, The Science of Making Your Dog Happy. So that's all about how to have a happy dog. And it takes your dog through every stage of their life, right through from getting a puppy or adopting an adult dog to when you have a senior dog and even the end of life, because that's a very hard part, but it's important to write about it. And I think it's helpful for people to know some of those things before they get to that stage. And so it takes you all through that, and it has at the end of every chapter a set of tips to apply the science at home. And at the end of the book, there's a checklist for a happy dog that people can go through and see, are they doing these things, or which of these ideas would they like to start doing with their dog to see if it makes a difference to their dog. And I firmly believe that when you know what your dog needs and you provide what your dog needs, then they are going to be happier basically, and they're going to be less likely to have behavior issues, and they're going to be more likely to have a good relationship with you. And that's why we get dogs, because we want a good relationship with them. So that's why I wrote that book.
I love that. I love that. So, out of all the things that are in the book, if you were to pull out like one thing that makes your dog happy, that like maybe pick the most underestimated one, or the one that most people wouldn't think of, what comes to mind?
Well, I think, can I pick two?
Oh,
I want
please,
to pick
please.
two
I just didn't
because
want to
there is
kind of discourage people from getting the book. But if you can pick two, go for it.
I'm going to pick two because I think there is one idea that has really caught on, and not just because of me talking about it, because lots of people have been talking about it, and that's the idea of giving your dog the opportunity to sniff. And I write in the book about how, from an animal welfare perspective, it's really important that your dog gets the opportunities to use their most important sense. And for them, of course, that's smell. And I especially like the idea of taking your dog on a sniffari, basically just giving them the chance to sniff as much as they like, and you give them the freedom to follow their nose so long as it's safe to do so. And I think that idea and the idea of playing scent games with your dog or doing nose work with your dog, we've seen a lot of people take up on this idea, and a lot more people are doing it now. And you can even get like snuffle mats from the pet store and so on, which you didn't used to be able to do. And I think that's wonderful. So I still think that is probably the most important thing for most dogs. It's something that is not present in their lives as much as they would like. So it's very easy for people to do. It doesn't have to cost anything, and you don't have to go anywhere. You can just go outside your door and let your dog sniff there. You can
Mm.
do online nose work classes if you want to. So I think that's important. The other one, though, that I do want to mention is that everyone should give their dog a safe space. The dog should have somewhere where they can go, where they are not going to be disturbed and they can just relax and chill out if they want to. And you are never going to go and get the dog from that space, because then it wouldn't count as their space. So if you want the dog from there, you have to call them to you and teach them to come when called, not actually go and get them. So especially in a busy household, it gives the dog somewhere quiet to go. And that's mentioned in WAG, but it is mentioned again, of course, in my most recent book, Bark, The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful, or Reactive Dog, because it's good for all dogs, but it's especially important for those fearful and anxious dogs.
That makes so much sense. And I'm really happy to hear that the idea of letting the dog sniff, that it's sort of really almost catching on, because I remember when I had my first dog, Leo, like this one there, and I don't know, like that's how I understood it. Like just without knowing anything, that's what I do. I would just kind of like, he wants to sniff, all right, it's your walk, like the amount of crap I took from neighbors. And it's like, oh no, like the dog needs to follow you. How can you you gonna, and you encourage him to pull and you do this. And this is like all these million reasons why that was like the worst thing to do, And and now with my two big girls, it's like, yeah, I'm just your bodyguard, really. Right? That's how I see it. And we go, and it's funny how the more space they get and the more time they get to literally not just like let them sniff a little bit, but literally until they go like, okay, I'm done now. And it's so funny to when they come home, they're wiped out. Like it's so funny, they're so wonderfully tired, even if you don't go any further than you normally would. It just really, yeah, it really tires them out.
Yeah, and I think that's something a lot of people don't realize until they start giving those opportunities to their dog. And yeah, as you say, it used to be the case, and certainly some people still will say, "Who's walking the dog?" or things like that, which is so annoying. But it is the dog's
How
walk.
many
That's the
times I
whole
heard
point
that?
of the walk. Yeah, so you want to make sure that your dog is enjoying it, and that means letting them sniff the female or whatever. You know, they they get a lot. They're reading like what has been happening in the environment, and it might be a bit boring for us sometimes, but actually for me, I'm quite happy just to stand there and watch them having a nice time sniff, and I'm quite happy just paying attention to what's going on around me and looking for the birds and the flowers and things like that, and I think that is good for me too. So
Yeah, I think so. I think so. It's actually really quite funny because that presence, I think it's really helpful. Like, yeah, I mean, for us to come down a little bit, but also that being present in the moment with the dogs. I have a friend locally, and she will always like, oh, I think she's given up, but she's so often she'd go, hey, why don't we walk the dogs together? And I'm like, I don't want to. I love that time, just the dogs and me. There's no phone, there's nobody to talk to, there's no messages to check. There's literally, it's just the dogs and me. And I totally love that, to be that like fully present and not just like, oh yeah, I'm doing my thing here and the dog's carrying on over there. It's yeah, so it's beautiful.
yeah, I think it's a really special time. And for me, like if I'm writing and I get stuck, now I don't often get stuck on things, but every writer gets stuck at some point, and you're like, I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to say this. I just take the dog. These days I have a senior dog, called Pepper. He's a Shih Tzu. He does not walk very far. He does a lot of sniffing, and he's very slow because he's a senior. But I just take him and go outside, and just 10 minutes outside watching him sniff, it helps, it refreshes me as well as him.
Yes.
So then I can come back to my computer and sit down, and I haven't necessarily solved the problem, but I'm in a better space anyway to resume working and resume writing. So that really helps whenever I get stuck. Like that time with the dog is really special time, just to relax and not think about anything and just be with him and in the moment completely. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That makes so much sense. Yeah, it's because like walking, like if you kind of get stuck, you've got to walk away, and nobody better to take along than a dog. So,
Yes.
so do people like come and work with you as well, or is like your books is your main channel?
So I have worked with clients. I'm currently taking a break because there are only so many hours in the day. And right now, my books are the main channel, and my blog and my podcast as well. So my book's Bark, Wag and Purr. So Bark came out in September. It's coming out in paperback in June of this year. So very soon. And I wrote that because I wanted to give hope to people with fearful and anxious dogs. And it can be so hard having a dog with behavior issues and a dog who's afraid, and people really put a lot of effort. They have to put a lot of effort into solving these situations. And I wrote Bark to give them hope and to say that, yes, we know it's hard, because I think it helps people to know that they're not alone, and also to give lots of practical tips for what to do with a fearful and anxious dog, especially because some of it is quite technical. And I wanted to be able to explain that in ways that mean that people can actually apply it and can do it. Because so often people say, well, I've tried this and it's not working. And there are so many things that you have to get right. And there are not many places that explain that very clearly. And of course, with my background in psychology, some of this is kind of bread and butter for psychologists anyway. So that helps. And like my other books, I've looked into all of the science and incorporated that in it, and lots of stories of my own dogs and of other people and the dogs that they have as well. So it's full of practical tips that I hope will help people. And I will be taking new clients again very soon, but only clients in Canada. And I only do consults over Zoom these days because it's a much better use of my time not to have to travel.
Yeah, and I think
And it
I know
works.
a
It
lot of people
works.
who do that now, and I think I mean, and I've heard people say that it's actually uh yes, it's better for your time, but it's actually I think also better for the dog because like
Mm.
you're not walking into that space, and because I get that happens a lot. I think like somebody new walks in and like you kind of mess up the entire dynamic. So of course the dog's going to be different, but then what they really need is that in their normal environment, things are different. So I think it's actually even, better for the dog as well.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm.
yeah, absolutely. And for cats too. I mean, it's exactly the same for cats, especially if you've got a fearful cat and you go into their space, well, they're going to run and hide. And you can see the setup, but you can see the setup just as well from talking to people, from what you see
Yeah.
on Zoom, from what they tell you about their home and their daily routines with their pets. So I think it works really well. And then as well as the books, I have obviously my blog. I still write my blog. So people can sign up to my newsletter if they want. Actually, there's a choice at the moment. You can sign up on my website, or if you're on into Substack, you can sign up on Substack instead. You get exactly the same. It makes no difference. And I like to write about things that will help people understand their dog better or cat, and also about the science. So I'm still keeping an eye on the canine science because I find that absolutely fascinating. And I'm still always looking out for new articles that I think will be interesting for people. And especially, I have a focus on dog training methods because along with other people, I know from the science how important it is to use reward-based methods with your dog and not to use aversives. And so that's one of the things that I especially keep an eye out on for the literature. But I also just love writing about anything to do with the human-animal bond or things to do with enrichment as well. Yeah, and there's so much interesting stuff. So
There's so
it's,
much. Yeah.
yeah.
Actually, I'm curious because I like it's really funny because I have a client, she's a therapist, right? And so she often talks about like her method to, for working with mostly sort of people with hypersensitivities. There's a lot of autism, a lot of, and it's really funny because so she also has a dog, right? And so we so often say like, you explain your method, like the entire thing, and like the books she's got, and and you literally replace hypersensitive like child with dog, and you've got a dog book, right? Like it's literally like from human psychology, like what was sort of is there something, where you think, God, I never knew the parallels were so strong? Or maybe there's an area where it's like, oh yeah, dog and people like are really different here, but surprisingly similar over there. So is there something that stood out to you when you started from the human psychology and then moved over into the animals?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I think it's something where what we know has changed so much over the years. So if you go back, way back a long way to when I was an undergrad and and a graduate student, um, everybody, of course, learnt behaviorism, behaviorist principles, how to do operant conditioning, what classical conditioning is. That's like every psychologist has to learn that. And then, of course, there's loads of other things that you learn about as well. But to think those are still basically what dog trainers do all of the time. So we know that's relevant. But what's really changed, I guess, a couple of things. One of them is that we used to think animals were not very clever. And I think every dog person has always believed that their dog actually is very clever, and they have given them a lot of credit. But science needs proof for things, and for a very long time was very firmly of this belief that humans are special, and that lots of things didn't apply, and that's completely changed. So I think that gives us more of a recognition of just what animals know, because now we recognize that dogs and other non-human animals are sentient beings. And I think that changes a lot. And I think that is partly what has led to the interest in canine science. And also, it changes how we think about our pets, because it means that we do actually have to do more for them. And it's changed how we think about animal welfare, because we no longer think just about preventing cruelty. And the five freedoms, that everybody knows of the five freedoms, they've done an amazing job for decades, ever since they were first created. But these days we know that it's not just preventing cruelty. We have a more modern model called the five domains, which looks also at providing positive experiences. And I think that's really important. And that's also something that a lot of dog guardians can get behind, because we like to see our dogs happy. So we want to be providing those positive experiences. But then one of the things I found really interesting when I was researching bark, because as well as my own experience and my own experience as a dog trainer, I also read all of the science, and I went back through some of the more recent science to make sure that I was up to date, because, of course, research on classical conditioning has changed since decades ago when I was a student. Um, and that was really interesting to me. And it's really interesting to me that a lot of this research is either on rats and mice, or it's on humans. And that's what we're drawing on to see how it applies to dogs. And there is a little bit on dogs, but there's not very much on dogs. But because there's a lot that's similar about the mammalian brain across different mammals, a lot of that is just very, very relevant. And I find that really interesting. And of course, it's slightly different in some of the studies with people. Maybe they're using chocolate or money and now as rewards, or when something scary happens or slightly unpleasant happens, to kind of try and reduce that threat. Of course, with dogs, we're using cheese or roast beef or something like that. But, a lot of it is very much the same, very similar protocols. And yeah, so I think that's great. And I love psychology as a discipline anyway. I think everybody should learn some psychology at some point in their lives, because it's so helpful and it's so interesting. And it just helps you to understand people better and relationships better and so on. So I've always been a fan of the subject. And I think I'm lucky that I had this academic background, and now I come to be able to use what I learned before in this very applied setting.
I love that. It's just so it's interesting how it sort of comes full circle, right? So how that passion sort of carries across, and the similarities are just striking. I think when I'm looking at the four dogs that have been in my life, I think the biggest surprise was literally what you just said. Like, we used to, I mean, growing up, I've always loved dogs, and I never knew how clever they are. Like, I think they're still so underestimated. It's like when I mean, even just the senses, like you kind of know it in theory, right? But when you have like a dog nervously panting forwards and backwards, and you don't know what the heck, and then tomorrow you read on the news, oh yeah, there was like a tiny little earthquake 500 miles away that even people locally didn't notice. And mine was like, and I'm like, oh my God, like, how dare I to kind of say you bark at nothing? It's like
Yeah.
it's me who is the who is the ignorant one, right? So I think that yeah, I think I definitely feel like I will never look down on a dog, right? I mean, not that I ever kind of look down on them, but sort of it's almost like a whole new appreciation of and how they read us. It's just remarkable. What's the main difference for you between um like everything we've talked about in relation to dogs? Am I totally off track to assume that a lot of that applies to cats as well?
A lot of it does apply to cats as well. I think one of the differences is there isn't as much research on cats, and I wish there was. But yes, so of course, thinking about positive experiences for cats, cats actually have amazing noses, and most people don't realize. So you can use scent as enrichment for your cat. You can do nose work with your cat if you want. You can hide treats for them to use their nose to find. And you can, if you have an indoors only cat, a really good thing to do is to make something called a sensory box and get things from outside that are safe for the cat to interact with and put them in a box and just bring it into your home and give your cat the choice of interacting with those things. And that would include probably things that they would want to sniff as well. And then, of course, everybody
Not
knows
mice
about
though.
cat. No, not mice. The cat might like that, but we wouldn't like that. Um, and then everybody knows about catnip for cats, but there are also some other substances that these days we know that cats have a similar response to. And it seems to be genetic. So even if your cat doesn't respond to catnip, because that is genetic, only some cats respond to it, most do, but not all, then these other substances, your cat still might respond to some of those. So that would be silver vine and Tatarian honeysuckle and valerian, for example, some of which are easier to find in cat toys than others. So that's one thing. I think doing a lot more enrichment for your cat is a really good idea. And so a lot is similar. And of course, we have to recognize what every kind of mammal needs, like to feel safe, for example, but also we have to recognize the individual needs of the species. And one of the things there for cats is that cats don't like to share. They're used to having to catch their own food. Like if they catch a mouse, it's not big enough to share with their fellow cats. So if people have multiple cats, it's really important to make sure that food is separated. Also, all of their resources are separated so that there's no competition between cats, so that they can get access to all of their resources without having to fight the other cat or the other cat being able to block them or anything like that. So that's one of the important things to think about with cats. But you can think again, though, even in a multi-dog home, you know that you don't want your dogs to be fighting over resources. So it's kind of similar, but it's even more important for cats because cats are used to kind of they can be solitary, they can manage completely on their own. Excuse me.
I had no idea. Yeah, I never even thought of that. That's fascinating. So I'm not going to ask you about your next book because I'm going to have you back for that one. So for now, where can people go and find out more about you, get in touch? I mean, obviously she's on Substack. That's where I found her. And, where can they go find the books and find out, yeah, get in touch with you?
Yeah, so if you're on Substack, you can find me. I'm Zazie Todd on Substack, and my newsletter is called Companion Animal Psychology. For anything else, you can find me on companionanimalpsychology.com. And that's also where you can subscribe to my newsletter. And you can find details of my podcast, The Positive Post in Conversation, which I run with my co-host, Christy Benson, and messages about new episodes go out there. And that's also where you'll find links to my YouTube as well. So that's the best place to go. And the books are available wherever books are sold. And Bark will be out in paperback on June 10th.
Awesome. Well, we shall definitely post a note about that to make sure people can get it. Well, thank you so much. I love how you combined, your original career with the new passion and how it all comes together to form this really helpful, informative space for us dog lovers and cat lovers. And
Thank you. It's been really fun chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so other dog lovers can find the show. If you haven't already, head over to soultouchedbydogs.com and sign up for weekly doggy cuteness, tips, recommendations, and personal stories to warm your dog-loving heart. And if you know a awesome human you think I should interview, I'd love an introduction. Email me at Anke, that's ANKE, @soultouchedbydogs.com.